So, hello, good evening. Thank you very much for coming today. I really hope from this session that you'll get some value and some benefit that will help you and your young ones get through this, what we hope will be a short lockdown. For those of you who don't know, my name is Steve. I'm one of the wellbeing facilitators at I'll Listen. And I'm also joined today by Lindsay Christian, our child and adolescent psychotherapist.
Good evening, everybody. It's lovely that so many people signed up for this webinar and for the other webinars that we have on this week and next week. So as Steve says, we really hope that you get some benefit from some ideas on how to support yourself and your children during lockdown.
So this is the first of 5 webinars we're delivering to support parents, students and teachers. Like I said, we hope this will be a very short lockdown, but we don't actually know quite yet. So we're going to give you some information and stuff that will hopefully help you through that. You probably noticed by now, everyone's microphone is actually set to mute. And the reason being is just to reduce that background noise when we're delivering today. But you can still get involved with regard to the chat function. You've obviously located that very easily, which is great. So if you do have any questions, please drop them into the chat box. Lindsay and I will answer as many as we can. If we've got time, we'll answer them all. And we'll answer them all at the end of the presentation, if that's okay. If there's anything sensitive that you'd like to discuss, I'd advise maybe not asking that question here. Our email address will be at the end of the presentation, and that way you'll be able to drop us an email and we can deal with that one-on-one with you to try and offer as much support as we can. With regard to the session, we've booked it in for an hour. It just depends on how many questions there are at the end, really. We won't be talking for an hour, but we're here to try and allow you to get as much as you possibly can from the session. So unfortunately found ourselves again in lockdown, and the format of today is I'm going to tell you a little bit about I'll Listen. So we don't currently operate within the primary schools on the island, but it is something that we're looking to do going forward. But we do work very, very closely with some of the secondary schools on the island. So I thought it would be a good place to explain what we do, because I'm sure some of you aren't aware of some of the things I'll Listen do, which I'll lead you through that. I'll then pass you on to Lindsay, who will talk to you about how you can support each other and support your family as well. So some really, really good stuff to talk about today. Fingers crossed, I've literally got my fingers crossed that the internet and everything works. So hopefully it runs smoothly for you. So who are I'll Listen? Well, I'll Listen is a charitable initiative. So 37 years ago, MCH Psychological Services was set up, which you'll probably know as Manx Cancer Help. And it was set up to support people going through cancer treatment and offer psychological support for them. In recent years, we realised we had the skills and expertise where we could actually add an initiative to the charity to support people more generally with their mental health. And that was the start of I'll Listen. So I'll Listen's been running now for over 2 years now. We had a pilot year 2 years ago, and this is our second year working within schools. And it's been a very successful initiative so far. So I'll Listen is early intervention and prevention in schools. And what that means is we're there to start the conversations, to remove that stigma around mental health. We believe that conversation should start early around emotions, feelings, and we look to equip young people with skills and coping techniques to help them get through life, really, because we all know that times in life it gets very hard. To give you some perspective on mental health, so mental health has 5 tiers, so tier 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Level 5 being your more serious cases of mental health conditions and illnesses. And level 1, tier 1, sorry, is where we sort of operate that early intervention, okay? We're an evidence-based service, and what that means is everything that we do is overseen by clinicians. We have clinical specialists who support the service, and that runs throughout the initiative. So our clinical lead, consultant clinical psychologist, Professor Robin Davidson, oversees the service. But as Lindsay's joined us today, a qualified psychotherapist, We also have qualified counsellors as well. So everything we do has that clinical oversight, so that when we deal with young people, we know that that content works. So largely going to focus around schools today, because obviously, you know, your child is in primary school, but ultimately could be going to secondary school next year or in a couple of years' time. And I'll tell you a little bit more around what we do with the schools. With regards to the workplace, we do work very closely with the workplace. So we have a team at iListen who support the workplace with mental health training on a variety of different subjects around mental health. Some companies will have iListen come in and support all their staff. Other times the workplace team will put on open courses where people from different organisations can come and stuff like that. So that's been a really, really good part of the initiative. And we also do stuff in the community as well. So during the summer, we did stuff with people around art therapy as a fun thing to do, but also the benefits of how that can support with people's mental health. And towards the back end of the year, we also spoke to lots of different groups around supporting the mental health, like mums and tots groups and stuff like that. So we're doing lots in the community. And 2021, we see the community work expanding. So I want to share this statistic with you. 1 in 8 5 to 19-year-olds have a mental health problem. 50% of all adult mental health problems are developed by the age of 14 and 75% by the age of 24. So I'm sure you'll agree with me that that's quite a staggering statistics, staggering couple of statistics. And for me, this really, really reinforces the importance of starting these conversations early. You know, really being open about your feelings, and because ultimately you can see from there, if we don't, that there's problems later on in life which we don't want to happen. So with regard to schools, I spoke about us working with secondary schools currently. So we currently operate and support with QE2, Queen Elizabeth II High School, King William's College, Ramsey Grammar, Bema Hague, and St Ninians. And we basically offer two services in schools. So the first support we offer is from our wellbeing facilitators. So this is what I do and my team. We look to create what we call the wider reaching messaging. So we go into schools, we will do assemblies, we will do PSHE lessons and workshops. So that's classroom 40, 50-minute sessions where they're quite interactive. We'll also supply content for them to do in their tutor tasks and stuff like that. And I've got working collaboratively there, because we don't just go into these schools with a list of content we want to deliver, because we just know that wouldn't work. What we like to do is work very closely with the schools, find out what's going on in that school. Each school's different, each year is different, and groups within each year is different, and they all present very different challenges for these students. So it's really, really important that we work collaboratively with each school and come up with content that can really add value to the school, but most importantly, add value to the students. So when we go into the schools and we deliver this content, we hope that some people will take that information and that will be enough for them. But we know sometimes that that's not enough and they need that further support. Some of the example of the stuff we've done in the past, we've done coping strategies around healthy coping strategies and unhealthy coping strategies. We've also done stuff around exam pressure, friendships, bullying, all sorts of stuff. Again, it just depends on what's actually going on at that time. So I mentioned some people might need a little bit more support, and that's where our listening service can come in. So we offer a one-to-one, safe, non-judgmental and confidential space for the pupils in the schools we support to come and talk one-to-one with one of our listeners. Now, I have said confidential there. There is a caveat to that. If the pupil or someone is in direct harm, we would break that confidentiality, as I'm sure you can understand why, and follow the safeguarding processes there to make sure that everyone's safety is well, it's just imperative that we look after the student's safety. The way that people can refer to this service, they can go to a teacher for a referral, and some schools have a self-referral policy where they can actually come straight to ourselves. With regard to our listeners, they're in the schools on a weekly basis. So each school has set days where the listener will be in there. Sometimes they just might need one session, others need two, others need 5 or 6. It just depends on what that criteria is. I spoke about at the start around us being early intervention, and our listeners are very aware of that. So actually, if something comes up in this one-to-one listening service that is potentially more of a level 2, level 3 or beyond concern, we would then have to signpost to the relevant service. So we would support the individual get that support, but ultimately we know where we operate in that mental health tier system. All our listeners receive 90 minutes clinical supervision each week. So this comes back to when I said us being about an evidence-based service. So our listeners are not psychologists, they're not qualified psychotherapists, and because we operate as early intervention, they're working towards that qualification, but with the clinical supervision, the support that Lindsay offers, as well as other clinical professionals within the initiative, we find this model to be very, very effective. So I just wanted to share with you some statistics from the secondary schools we've been working with. And these statistics are from September through to the end of the year, so just before we broke up in December. So the wellbeing facilitators have delivered 56 sessions. So like I said, that's assemblies, workshops and interactive sessions. And we've had over 4,100 people interactions. So that's not the number of individual students, that's the number of times we've interacted with the people. And just to explain that a little bit further, we do go in and do some assemblies with some schools, but I always try very keenly to see if we can follow up with an interactive session and then some sort of reflective sheet or tasks to do, because it's really, really important that people get the correct level of support around their mental health. And actually a 15 to 20 minute assembly sometimes isn't enough, and we need to explore different concepts and stuff like that. So we've actually seen around 2,600 students, but on some schools we've been able to follow, we've been able to do an assembly, then follow up with an interactive session, and then follow up again with a shorter reflective task, which has been proven very successful actually. And the listening service have actually seen 95 pupils from September to December. So the majority of them pupils now have utilised the listening service and worked through some concerns they've had and no longer need it, and others it's still very much ongoing. So I'm very conscious with lockdown, you're probably more keen to find out on what you can do with your young one to get through, but I just thought this would be a really nice opportunity to share, just in case you didn't know, around what we do. So thank you very much for listening. I'm now going to pass you on to Lindsay. Thank you.
So thanks very much again, and thanks for that introduction, Steve, and for letting everybody know exactly what our listeners are currently doing within the secondary schools and what we hope to be doing within the primary schools very soon. So what I'm going to just touch on this evening covers an array of things really. So firstly, we're going to look at what you might see as parents with your young people, at some of the behaviours, some of the feelings that you might see, some of the things you might see at home currently during this lockdown period. Then we're going to look at specifically supporting young people during the lockdown, what you can do. We're going to touch on looking after yourselves as parents, because that's obviously really, really important, because if you can't look after yourself, you're going to be less available to be able to look after your young people. And then we're going to touch on some of the practical things. We're going to look at some of the practical things that you can do, some of the perhaps funner things that you can do, and we've got a whole array of things. So if we think about, to begin with, about what you might see as parents with your children. So obviously this is not an exhaustive list. This is just some of the things that we think are important and some of the things that we see on a regular basis, some of the things that are brought into our sessions. So in terms of changes in mood, so it might be that your child starts feeling particularly low, maybe a little bit more worried, a little bit more anxious. Maybe that's that sort of sense of panic there, especially around worries to do with COVID and the restrictions and all the guidance that's in place. It might be that they, the ability to cope with situations that they've been able to cope with in the past decreases. So there's might be subtle changes in mood, but again, it might be something that's quite extreme. And changes in behaviour sort of goes alongside that, really. So it might be, you know, changes in personality, changes in likes and dislikes. They might become a little bit more irritable than usual, bit more clingy. That's something that's quite common in children, especially in times of worry and stressful situations. You might find that there are sort of regressive behaviours. So a child might become more clingy, things like bedwetting, those types of things you might start to see. In terms of the increased social isolation, obviously that's quite difficult because of the government restrictions and the guidance in place, that we are naturally going to be perhaps a little bit more socially isolated because we can't interact with people in the same way that we have been doing prior to the lockdown. But it might be that actually your children decide that they don't really want to speak to you, don't want to interact with other family members via telephone or video calls. They don't want to sort of interact with school friends or anything that the teachers might be putting on. So those are the sorts of things you might start to see in terms of the increased social isolation. With disturbed sleep patterns, it might be that, again, it's very difficult to try and keep a routine, especially when you're homeschooling and you're trying to juggle lots of things. And it might be that some of the routines go out the window a little bit, and we can all be forgiven for that. What you might see, though, is things like your children sleeping more or not sleeping as much. Things like night terrors are quite common in particularly in younger children. Again, I've touched on before about the changes in behaviour, things like bedwetting at night, taking a long time to settle, feeling maybe a bit scared at night time in particular, and that's usually around having that time to actually think about things. During the day, you tend to be more occupied, and then at night time, you've obviously got that time to really think about things. So some of these behaviours could come out more so at night time, at bedtime routines, and you might see some disturbed sleep patterns. In terms of eating problems, again, we've touched on the fact that it's difficult to keep routines, and you might see some things with eating problems such as overeating, undereating, craving lots of sort of sweet stuff, especially if your child isn't sleeping particularly well and might be a little bit more irritable. They might decide that they don't want to start eat proper meals. They're snacking a little bit more. So there might be some subtle changes to their eating habits. In terms of low self-esteem, that might be around their sense of self and their sense of worth, not feeling like they're good enough, not feeling like they can achieve things. Sort of what's the point, that sort of attitude. And again, that can be quite subtle things. It can be just that they start moving back from things. They don't really want to get involved in things, but actually that might be to do with their self-esteem and feeling like they're not able to do things, and they're not feeling that they're good enough. Losing interest in hobbies. Obviously, a lot of hobbies to do with young people tend to be outside, things like brownies, things like rainbows, going swimming, into dance classes, etc. It all involves that human contact and getting out and about, which obviously we're very restricted on at the moment. But it might be that actually they start losing interest in their hobbies. They don't want to go back to dance class once lockdown is over. They're not interested in getting out of the house. They don't really want to partake in anything to do with their particular hobby during lockdown. And when we're looking at maladaptive coping strategies, so all coping strategies serve a purpose, whether they're deemed good or bad. But what we mean by maladaptive coping strategies are strategies that are probably seen more so on the bad side, but they do serve a purpose. So some of these things, and some of them can be quite extreme, but some of the lesser ones might be around sort of hair pulling, pinching, smacking or slapping, isolating themselves might be another one. Emotional numbing, so not really wanting to to think about things, not really wanting to get in touch with those feelings. They're all sort of low-level maladaptive coping strategies. But what I would say is that all coping strategies serve a purpose for that person at any given moment. So even though it might be deemed as, bad, or why are we doing that, or it's not really the norm, it's serving a purpose. And what I would say around maladaptive coping strategies is that there is always a reason for a behaviour. So behaviour, and this goes for any behaviour, is that a behaviour won't just start out of nowhere. There is always a reason for it. There's always a background to it. And so really, the advice that I would give anybody that's seeing a behaviour that isn't within the norm of that child is to really have a conversation. And we'll sort of speak about that as we go on this evening, about having those open conversations. But what I would say is there is always a reason to a behaviour. So if we think about supporting younger children during lockdown, so again, this is not an exhaustive list by any means, but are some of the real things that we think are really important for parents to really think about. I would say probably one of the most important things is about open communication. So it's about, I would say probably point 1 and point 2 really go together. So it's about openly communicating with your child or your children. It's about keeping them up to date about what's happening, but in an age appropriate way. It's about really thinking about what they need to know in terms of COVID and the lockdown and the restrictions. It's really sort of using your parental judgment about actually what they need to know. But it's about openly communicating. It's about being open and honest. It's not about keeping things that maybe they do need to know from them. It's about ensuring that you've got a safe, contained space for that child to speak to you. So don't have conversations when you know that you're going to be rushed, or you're going to be interrupted, or you're busy with work. Try and have some protected time each day just to check in with your child. How are you doing? What are your plans for today? These are the subjects we've got to do. How are you feeling about doing them? Have you got any worries or concerns? Those types of questions. And what that will do is that will allow your child or your children to actually realise that they can come and speak to you. It will make that very much more a two-way street, so they can come and speak to you. They'll be more willing to come and speak to you. But it's about you ensuring that there's an environment where they feel like they can come and speak to you. So it's about you as parents taking that ownership and actually having that open communication with your child. Something that's really important is about acknowledging and validating feelings. So some feelings that some young people might come up with, and this is not just for young children, it's right across the board. We've all perhaps been accused of having irrational thoughts or irrational feelings, but actually it feels right for us at that moment. And that's what I would say about young children, is that actually they may come to you saying, I feel really scared. And you're thinking, but what have you got to feel scared about? What have you got to feel worried about? But actually for that child, it's very real for them in that moment. And so it's about acknowledging that and validating it. It's about taking that on board and realising that actually, okay, so it might not feel true to us, and we might not be able to understand why they're feeling that way. But for your child, it feels really real for them. And it's about really then taking that communication and openly communicating and finding out the reasons for it. And that might take a bit of time. And I'm not saying that they're sort of easy conversations to be had. But it is really important that alongside sort of acknowledging and validating the feelings, that you that open communication is there. And what I would say alongside that is, don't feel afraid to share how you feel with your children. Obviously, using your parental judgment. I'm not saying you need to go, and tell them absolutely everything, but it's okay to say, actually, I feel really worried about the restrictions at the minute, and that's okay. It's about showing them that you're human and you have those feelings as well. And by doing that, it will allow your child to realise that actually they can have those feelings and they can speak to you about those feelings, and they're going to be validated, that it's okay to have them. So that is really important. And that's something that I would always say to parents of children that I come into contact with. Don't be afraid to show your feelings. Obviously, you've got to take your judgment on how much you share, but it's okay to say things like, I'm feeling really sad, or I'm feeling really scared, because that's normal. And it's about normalising some of these feelings rather than making them feel abnormal for children. In terms of the active parenting, so children learn from parents. They learn from seeing things, watching things, observing things. I'm sure you've all looked at your child and thought, my goodness, they're doing that, and that's exactly what I do, and they're copying me. And that's because children learn from behaviours, from conversations, from seeing things. And so with active parenting, rather than saying to your child, go and do that, or you need to do this, or go and do some maths, if you've got the opportunity, even if it's for 5 minutes, to say, let's do some maths, let's sit down, you show me what maths you need to do. And by actually sitting down with them and being active with them, even for 5 minutes, and I know we're probably a bit more restricted for time at the moment because we're all under the one roof and there's lots of dynamics and there's lots of things that you're trying to juggle. But if you can parent actively and actually be alongside your child, even if it's just for 5 minutes with a task, they're far more likely to actually do that task. And rather than seeing you as a nagging parent, which is quite often a thing that we hear, they'll actually probably get on with that task a lot easier and a lot quicker because you're sitting down and showing them what to do and you're having that time with them. They don't be too prescriptive and they keep the routine as much as possible is what I would say goes together. We're in unprecedented times at the minute. Your parents probably having to try and juggle a million things, being a parent, working, being a teacher. You might have younger children, older children, children of all different ages that you're all trying to juggle all at once, keeping everyone safe, going out and do the shopping, all the rest of it. Obviously at school is quite a set format. Children have certain subjects at certain times with certain lessons. Don't worry too much about being too prescriptive. Yes, it's great to try and keep a routine as much as possible, but actually, if you don't stick to exactly the same times that school had in place, if you don't achieve absolutely everything that you need to in a day, if life gets in the way and you get a work call and actually that goes on for an hour and then little Bobby has actually missed out on an hour's worth of maths, is it the end of the world? And I think that's what you've got to really think about. It's about having a routine as much as possible, but allowing that flexibility and try not to be too prescriptive. We are in unprecedented times at the minute, and unless you are a teacher by nature, you're not a teacher, and actually you're just doing the best that you can. And so it's just about going easy on yourself and actually realizing that you are doing as much as you can do, and that's all that anybody can ask of you. Take time out to have fun. I think that's really important. I think especially when our roles have changed slightly and we're on having to be in teacher mode for lots of us, actually take time out to have fun. And we're going to sort of speak about that a little bit later, about some of the things that you can do for fun, and the next point there about getting outside. Yes, we're a bit restricted at the moment in terms of how many times we can get outside, but we are able to get outside for exercise each day. The island has got some fantastic places. A lot of it's on our doorsteps. Obviously, the government guidance is that we don't travel too far to go to places, but there's lots of places around and about that or a very short drive away that people can get to, and get outside and get some vitamin D and have fun with your child. And the last point there is about asking for help. So there's an array of help out there. So whether that's your teacher, your child's teacher, they are there to help at the end of the day. They're only at the end of a phone or an email. And yes, it may take them a little while to get back to you, but ultimately they're there for the child still, even though they haven't got them in classrooms with them. They're still there to be able to support you and your child. There's an array of sort of support groups online. Tap into other parents who might be going through a very similar experience, and you can actually have that two-way conversation about how are you coping with doing this. I know I've got some friends who are parents, and they've got younger children at primary school and trying to get on some of their online platforms, for instance, has been a bit of a nightmare. And I know some of my friends have been sharing sort of tips and tricks on how to get on online platforms so that they can actually teach their children. So it is about asking for help. It's about keeping that contact with other parents and family and teachers, because ultimately that is what they're there for at the moment. Really important, looking after yourself as parents, because actually if your ability to cope isn't there, if you're not looking after yourself, how are you supposed to look after your child or your children? Obviously at the moment it is a really difficult situation. You are probably wearing about 100 different hats, and that in itself can be really daunting, trying to juggle absolutely everything. But it's about being realistic, and we sort of spoke about this just before. It's about being realistic about what you're going to achieve in a day. Chances are you're not going to do a 7.5 hour day like your child does at school, and that's fine. Actually, do you need to? It's about ensuring that your child is having fun and is learning, but it might be that the learning comes in different ways. It might be that you use different practical ways of teaching your children. And again, we'll talk about this in a bit, but it is very much about being realistic about what you're going to achieve and actually setting goals. And if you don't achieve those goals, it's okay. You're doing the best that you can do. And I think that's a really important message to take away from today, that we're all doing the best that we can and nobody is perfect. Perfect does not exist. And actually just about being realistic about what you're going to be able to achieve and being okay with what you're achieving. Acknowledge your feelings as a parent. It's really difficult wearing all the different hats. It's really difficult getting put in situations where you don't particularly want to be. Sometimes it might feel a bit like a pressure cooker being at home, where you've got trying to accommodate your children and your partner and do all your work and everything. It can really feel like a pressure cooker at times. And it's about acknowledging your feelings about, how am I feeling today actually? Am I feeling okay? And if I'm not feeling okay, what can I do to try and make myself feel okay? It's not about feeling brilliant necessarily. It's about keeping yourself in a place of okayness. So it's about realizing that actually, if I'm not feeling as good as I normally would be, what can I do? And that might be, well, we'll talk about that in a second, but it might be about taking some time out for yourself. Comparison is the thief of all joy. It really is. It really, really is. We're a natural race of comparing ourselves to other people. I've got friends, like I say, that are saying, oh, but such and such is doing this and they're teaching this way and they're doing this and it's brilliant and they're teaching for 6 hours a day, and that's great for them. That's brilliant for them. But actually every circumstance and every family and every dynamic is very, very different. And what works for one set of values and family is actually very different for other people. So it's about finding actually what works for you as a family, what works for you as a parent, and sticking with that. Don't be comparing yourself to Jill down the road or Bill up the road. And what they're doing is great and it works for them, but it doesn't necessarily mean that's right, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it's right for you. So it's about finding what works for you as an individual, as a parent, as a family, and going with that. Okay. Taking time out for yourself each day is super, super important. So I know for some families that's going to be easier than others, especially if you're, say, a single parent. That might be a little bit more difficult, especially if you're the sort of primary caregiver. That can be really difficult. But even if it's 10 minutes a day, even if it's 10 minutes, it's about having some allocated, protected time for yourselves, for you to do something for you. And the list is endless of the things that you might do. So it might be, if you are a single parent and time is a bit more lacking, it might be just taking yourself into another room or into a garden if you're fortunate enough to have a garden. It might be just taking yourself outside for 10 minutes, having a cup of tea, reading a book. I know obviously the weather isn't the best for going outside, but it's just about finding something that works for you. It might be, if you're fortunate enough to have an older child that can look after younger children, or if you've got a partner or husband or wife there, it might be that you go for a bubble bath. It might be that you get out for a walk or a run on your own, do an exercise class. Literally, the possibilities are endless, and not everything needs to be lengthy in time. It can be something that is literally 10 minutes if that is all you have got. But it is really important that you take time out for yourselves each day. It's a bit of self-care. It's not selfishness, it's self-care, and we all need it. We spoke about this before, about being kind to yourselves. You really do need to be kind to yourselves. We're all doing the best we can. We're all doing what we can in these times at the moment. And again, if you're a teacher and you're at home teaching your kids, brilliant. But for most of us, we're not teachers and we're just trying to do the best that we can. And actually just getting through each day is a little victory, and take the little victories. Absolutely take the little victories. If your child manages to get to bed tonight without having a tantrum because they've had a tantrum 3 days in a row, take the victory. Absolutely. And it's about taking the little victories when they come. But try and be as kind to yourself as possible, because if you're not kind to yourself, how can we expect anybody else to be kind to us? So it is very much about looking after ourselves and staying connected with other people. So scheduling times for phone calls, video calls, you know, take time on social media if that's your bag, but it might be about limiting some social media. It might be, you know, doing virtual things with friends. I know the last lockdown I did like things like virtual quizzes with friends when kids had gone to bed. You know, it's about anything about that, keeping in contact and having that human connectedness with people. We're naturally a race that likes connectedness. Human connectedness is massive. It's part of who we are, having that physical sense of touch. And whilst we can't really do that at the minute, still having that human contact via online media, phone calls, etc., is really, really important. So it's about having those connections with people, and it might be about actually setting aside some time each day and putting those in the diary. So every night at 7 o'clock, I give my friend a ring and we have a bit of a chat about how the day has gone. It's things like that that's really important. And for you as parents, it's really important that you seek help if needed. So whether that is through family and friends, whether that is through, you know, if perhaps you're having difficulties and your mental health is you know, starting to be affected, it might be about contacting your GP. Your GP is still there. It might be about looking at online resources. There's loads out there. But we're hoping that some of the things that we talk about today will help with that, but it is about seeking help if needed, and that's really, really important. I'm not going to talk through all of these practical ideas because there's lots there. And again, not an exhaustive list, but this list has come from parents that we've come into contact with, from some of our therapists who are parents. They're all tried and tested things that have worked in the previous lockdown and are working in this lockdown. I know, Steve, I know you've got a little girl, and I don't know whether you're happy just to say some of the things that you've been doing as practical ideas.
Yeah, for sure. We've done a few of these things. To be honest, we've tried to find out what works and what doesn't work. At the moment, my 6-year-old daughter is obsessed with Harry Potter. So we are working through them as film nights, as you can see on the right-hand side. So it works really well, actually, because it motivates her to do stuff, because she knows that the reward at the end of the day is to sit down and watch Harry Potter. So that's worked quite well. We've also done a lot of exercising together. So, for example, when we have gone out for a short space of time, I can jog next to her while she's on her bike, and she really, really enjoys that, and it burns off that excess energy. I found that for me, I try and get out around lunchtime, so it breaks up the day for me to allow me to do bits of work, but also as well, she's ready to let off a little bit of steam around that time as well. And the other thing that we do, and I find real value in this, and I know she does as well, is the keeping a diary, a journal. So she has a happy self journal, which I bought online, and just before bed, it usually asks you different questions each day, but one of the pages is around 3 things that you've enjoyed today, and we really do pick out the really sort of stuff that kids might miss, and just really basic stuff. You know, we played this, we did this, we cuddled and watched this, and it really does send her to bed in a really nice frame of mind. So they're currently the things that are working for me, but we're only early on in the lockdown, aren't we?
We are, but they sound like really great things. And I think some of the things that some of my friends who have got primary age children have said to me about things like doing things that are practical. So it might be like gardening or cooking or baking, but actually incorporating that within some of their school learning. So it might be that you think about like maths and with cooking and baking, and getting them to think about, I know it's probably you're a bit young for fractions and that type of thing, but about counting and measuring and those types of things are easily incorporated into a math session, but it's practical, it's fun, and then there's something yummy to eat at the end of it. It might be that you do something around gardening and actually get your child to plant some seeds or tend to some plants and see how they grow. And you can do so many things. And one of the things we've got there is about scavenger hunts. There is a whole array of them online. So basically, if you type in scavenger hunts, there are literally scavenger hunts for absolutely everything. Indoors, outdoors, specific topics. There's like maths ones, science ones, nature ones. There's here we've got a few here. There's a whole array online. And what I would say is that we have put together quite a comprehensive list of some practical ideas for sort of engaging your young people during lockdown, which we're happy to give out at the end. We just need people's email address if you want to send us your email address. On the last slide is our email address at I'll Listen. So if you want to send your email address to us, just send a little email saying, yeah, I'd love the practical tips guide. We can send that out to you. But there's literally, the internet is absolutely laden with stuff. And this page on the back here are some of the absolute favourites of ours. So we've sort of spoke about the scavenger hunts. They cost nothing. They're already there. You don't have to think about them. You could get your child to actually make a scavenger hunt. You know, that would keep them occupied for probably quite a little while. I think one of the important things for me, and certainly my thing, is very much exercise. And a lot of my friends who've got young children, they've been doing exercise classes together. So I know in the last lockdown, PE with Joe Wicks was super popular and everybody was doing it. It's free. I believe he started doing it again. I think it's 3 days a week. So I think it's Monday, Wednesday, Friday. It's like 9:30 in the morning on his YouTube channel, 20-30 minutes. Children can do that on their own because it's obviously aimed at children. You can do it with them as something fun and keeping you active as well. But there's literally a whole array of things. And Steve, I don't know whether you want to maybe have a little chat about the top pictures there.
Yeah, so the top left-hand corner, that is the thought journal. That is the Happy Self journal. So you can sort of see, you get 3 questions. You rate your day by an emoji, and then at the bottom, how many of these can you tick off? It could be, I've enjoyed reading, I've ate delicious food, I was grateful for the day, and stuff like that. It's a really lovely activity to do with your young one. The middle one is something that I've used quite regularly, and set up a little station next to yours. When we all probably have work commitments to do, and sometimes we just need that time where we can actually just get that 15 to 30 minutes of real focus to get something done for work. So setting a little desk up next to you for your little one, giving them an activity to do, and sort of making it fun. Sometimes I'll say to mine, right, we're going to have 30 minutes of work time, and a bit of enthusiasm sometimes can go a long way. So spending a bit of time doing that, I've found works. And Lindsay talked around the social interaction. So in the top right hand corner, whether it's with school, whether it's with friends, whether it's with grandparents or whatever that may be, but that interaction is really powerful. I think even at 6 years old, we arrange as parents to have little catch-ups with her friends via the iPad and stuff like that, and it really impacts her mental health in a positive way.
And so another thing, just thinking, it's something that's really super important, and I know, Steve, we spoke about this before, is something like a reward chart. And actually your child can get a point or a little star or whatever it is. They can design their own reward chart. The reward doesn't have to be big. It can literally be a packet of buttons or something like that. It can be just something very small, but actually the reward element of something for a small child is actually huge. They crave the reward, and so actually getting them to do things is much easier. You probably call it bribery, but actually if it makes your life a little bit easier, and what I would say is, if you're going to go down that route, make the reward small, because I think it's quite easy to get into it where the next minute you're buying all sorts, but actually it's reward for something small. But young children really thrive off that sort of reward system, and so that might be something, and getting them to actually design their own reward chart can be really good, and would give you a bit of a break for half an hour whilst they get the glitter and the pens and everything out. So that's just something else to think about. So then if we just think about some of the key points then from what we've discussed this evening, and so open communication, I really can't sort of say how strongly I feel about this. Open communication is absolutely important. So checking in with your child every day, checking in with yourself every day is really important. Having that protected time so that your child can come and speak to you, and you can ask them, how are you? How are things? Have you got any worries or concerns? Allowing them to openly communicate with you and offering that space will allow them to come to you much more freely. Please remember it's okay to make mistakes and not have all the answers. If a child asks you a question, especially if it's something to do with school, if a child asks me something about maths, I'd be completely lost. It might be something to do with their schoolwork. It might be something to do with coronavirus and the lockdown and the restrictions specifically. It's okay to say, actually, I haven't got the answer to that, but I'll try and find the answer. And actually, there might be some questions that they ask you that we just don't have the answers to. And I suppose I'm specifically talking around sort of restrictions and the end of the lockdown. We don't have those answers yet. And it's okay to say, we don't know, we haven't got those answers. But if we do get those answers, then I'll come back to you. It's okay. It's better to say that than to say nothing at all, or to try and make up something. So it's okay to say you've not got all the answers, because actually nobody does. Acknowledge feelings. So acknowledge the feelings of your young person when they're coming to you and saying, I'm feeling X, Y, and Z, or you're seeing a certain behaviour, and then you have that conversation and they say, well, I'm feeling like this, I'm feeling like that. Even if it doesn't sit right with you, even if you can't understand why they're feeling that way, it's really important to acknowledge those feelings and to validate those feelings, because actually for that child in that moment, those feelings are real. And I suppose that's the same for ourselves. It's really important that actually we acknowledge our own feelings, because we will have good days, we'll have rubbish days. And it's okay to have all of those feelings. You know, it's okay to feel great one day and rubbish the next day. We're just trying to do our best. Be kind to yourselves. You know, I really can't reiterate that enough either. Just be kind to yourselves. We're doing the best we can in really difficult circumstances. Lots of stuff is out of our control at the minute, and it really is about thinking about what is in our control. It's okay to really think about things that are out of our control, but actually you're wasting your time, because a lot of stuff is out of our control. The things that we can influence and the things that we can control are the things you need to focus on, and actually that will then start with a really positive mindset that will naturally make you feel like you're able to achieve a lot more when you stop worrying about the things that you can't control. And get active, get outside for you exercise each day, whether that's a walk, a run, whatever it is. Get outside with the kids, go exploring, obviously within current government guidelines. Do some online classes, do whatever. Get out in the garden if you're fortunate enough to have one, whatever it is, but get active. Get those natural chemicals within your body flowing and get those happy hormones going, but get active. And I think at this point, we're going to go to some questions. So if anybody has got any questions that they would like to ask, we've got some time now to ask if there's anything specific. Obviously, if people don't feel comfortable or you can't think of any questions now, on our last slide, we have got our email address. So you're absolutely more than welcome to send some questions to us, and either myself or Steve will get back to you, usually probably within sort of 24 hours or thereabouts. We'll get back to you with some answers as much as we can. That's our email address there at the bottom, info@ilisten.im, if anybody's got any questions.
So if you've got any questions, you can just use the chat. So you are still all on mute, just to reduce the background noise. So please feel free to drop a question in the chat. There isn't actually any there right now. So I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, Lindsay, but we'll take it so far. But if anyone does want to pop a question in now, we can answer that. And just while I've asked that, just in case anyone is typing, you'll see at the bottom left-hand corner, you'll see a QR code and also a link there to potentially give us some feedback, really. It is tough times. We've created this content to try and help you through this lockdown, but we'd really be grateful if you take literally 1 or 2 minutes to give us some feedback. And the way you can do that is scan that QR code via your smartphone. It will take you straight to the questionnaire. Or I'm going to actually pop in the chat myself the link to it. So if you do get a minute, just literally click on that link, honestly, 1 or 2 minutes, and we'd be very, very grateful, because if there's any way we can improve, we'd love to be able to do that.